When you wake up in the morning and face the day, do you ever wonder, what's the point of all this? Life unfolds with its routines, its challenges, and for many of us, a sense of deep dissatisfaction or confusion. Albert Camus, a French philosopher and writer, spent much of his life exploring these uncomfortable questions. His philosophy, which centers around the concept of the absurd, is as timely as it is timeless. Camus doesn't offer comforting answers or clear solutions. Instead, he asks us to confront the reality of a world that seems indifferent to our quest for purpose. Camus isn't saying life is pointless. He's saying that, given the apparent meaninglessness of life, it's our struggle against this absurdity that shapes our existence. In Camus' most famous work, The Myth of Sisyphus, he introduces the concept of the absurd. The absurd is the tension between our innate desire to find meaning in life and the cold, indifferent universe that offers no such answers. To illustrate this, Camus draws upon the Greek myth of Sisyphus, a king condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down every time he reaches the top. This eternal, pointless task becomes a metaphor for human existence. We are, like Sisyphus, engaged in a struggle to make sense of a world that seems to resist any coherent meaning. The absurd for Camus arises from this confrontation between our desire for meaning and the universe's refusal to provide it. The struggle itself is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. But here's the twist. Camus doesn't advocate for resignation or despair in the face of the absurd. Instead, he calls for rebellion. Sisyphus, despite the futility of his task, is not a defeated figure. In Camus' eyes, he represents the human spirit's resilience. The key isn't to find meaning in life, because there is none, but to embrace life's absurdity and live fully in spite of it. Camus' philosophy is often confused with nihilism, but there's a crucial difference. Nihilism suggests that life is not only meaningless, but that nothing has value and nothing matters at all. Absurdism, on the other hand, acknowledges life's inherent meaninglessness, but rather than falling into despair, it encourages us to live in a way that defies the absurd. In The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus writes, "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide." For Camus, suicide is the ultimate response to the absurd, the belief that if life has no meaning, it's better to end it all. But Camus rejects this idea. His answer to the absurd is not to escape it, but to confront it with defiance and passion. But how, you may ask, can one live authentically without the belief in a higher meaning or purpose? The answer lies in Camus's vision of life. The human spirit can flourish, not by seeking solace in some external goal or divine order, but by fully embracing the present, with all its contradictions and complexities. To live authentically is to accept life's absurdity, and yet to find joy and beauty in it. One of the central themes in Camus's philosophy is rebellion. Not a rebellion against society or politics, but a rebellion against the absurdity of existence itself. For Camus, this rebellion is essential to human freedom. It's a form of defiance, accepting the world as it is, with all its meaninglessness, and yet choosing to act as though it matters. In The Rebel, Camus delves into the idea of the human revolt. He describes the rebel as someone who refuses to accept the world's indifference and asserts their own freedom. The rebel is not passive in the face of the absurd, but rather actively rejects resignation. The act of rebellion for Camus is not about finding meaning in life, but about maintaining dignity, freedom, and justice in the face of a universe that seems indifferent to all of these. The rebel is the one who acknowledges the absurdity of existence, but chooses to live passionately, to love deeply, to create art, and to engage in social justice. The rebel doesn't seek ultimate answers or transcendence. Instead, they find value in the struggle itself. This rejection of transcendental meaning has profound implications on how we live our lives. If life's meaning is not handed down from on high, then it's up to us to give it meaning. Through our choices, our actions, and our relationships, we create meaning in an indifferent world. Perhaps one of the best examples of Camus's philosophy in action is found in his novel, The Plague. Set in a fictional town stricken by a devastating epidemic, the story explores how people respond to a crisis that strips away any illusions of control or meaning. In the face of suffering, death, and fear, the characters in The Plague grapple with the absurd. Some try to escape, others accept it and turn to religious or political ideologies for solace. But the true hero of the novel is Dr. Rue, a character who continues to fight the plague with compassion, resilience, and a sense of duty, even though he knows that his efforts will ultimately be in vain. The plague is, in many ways, a metaphor for the absurd. It represents the chaotic, uncontrollable nature of life, and the way in which suffering and death are part of the human condition. But like Sisyphus, Dr. Rue's response is not to succumb to despair, but to continue his work. The fight against the plague is futile, but the struggle itself is what gives life its meaning. In the end, Camus's philosophy invites us to a life of freedom, rebellion, and responsibility. By acknowledging the absurd, we can free ourselves from the burden of seeking ultimate meaning. We can embrace the inherent meaninglessness of life and find joy in the struggle itself. In a world that often seems indifferent, Camus teaches us that our response matters. Our actions, our love, our creativity, these are the things that make life worth living, not because they lead to some transcendent goal, but because they are, in themselves, acts of rebellion against the absurd. So, the next time you're faced with life's inevitable struggles, remember Camus's advice. Don't look for meaning, create it. Rebel against the absurd, and in doing so, find your own version of freedom. How do you make sense of life's meaning, or its apparent lack thereof? Do you agree with Camus's view of the absurd, or do you think there's more to the story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective.